Forrest Gump is one of my favorite movies. In that movie, Forrest Gump is a character who lives many decades going through and learning different skills or kind of and bumbling through things in a kind of a lovable kind of way. He meets a character named Lieutenant Dan. Lieutenant Dan is a veteran who loses his legs in the war, and he actually literally curses out God in the movie. He curses him out, shoots him the bird, everything, but then he makes his peace with God. Forrest Gump literally says Lieutenant Dan finally made his peace with God. This movie is filled with sort of Christian stuff in it, sort of messaging about the afterlife or spiritualism. It's not about that totally, but it has that. Jenny is a character who is abused, and her whole life she would sort of pray. She would say, "Dear God, make me a bird so I can fly far, far, far away from here." And every time Forrest talks to his mother, she'll bring up something about God. God has a plan for you. All this. It's obviously rich with that belief that there is an afterlife. Here's the thing: I'm an atheist, but I still love that movie. Like, I love that movie. It doesn't matter to me that there is this message in there that in that world, the writer and the script writers, the people who worked on that movie are delivering the story, the message that God is real and that he, she, whatever, has some kind of impact on this world. That's clear in the story. I don't care. I like a good story. Now, if you're the kind of person who, when you see something political pop up in a movie and you say, "Oh, it's getting so political now," all that means is that it's just it usually means it's against your politics. Because if you're a Christian, I guarantee you never got mad at Forrest Gump for having overt Christian storytelling and a bit of imagery in there. That doesn't bother you at all, probably. You're probably not upset with Zack Snyder's Superman, Man of Steel, in which he very much turned him into a Christ-like figure. That probably didn't bother you that much if you're already a kind of person who's Christian and thinks of Superman as an aspirational Christ-like figure. Then that didn't bother you, probably. It only seems to bother people when the politics in a movie is both overt and it conflicts with their politics. Because it's overt in Forrest Gump. It's just that most of you are probably somewhat believers. And so it probably never bothered any of you that there was obviously, I mean, you could watch Con Air. I remember Con Air with Nicolas Cage. And in it, there's a spot where this guy is dying and he tells Nicolas Cage, "I'm dying and all I can keep thinking is that God doesn't exist." And Nicolas Cage says in a rough southern accent, "I'm going to show you God does exist." And he goes and beats up the bad guys and wins the day. That's still a fun action movie. That didn't take me out of it. I think it's because I understand every single time as a writer, every single thing you make is going to have politics in it, even if you never mention the word Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, democracy, even if you never mention that at all. If you absolutely keep those words out of your mouth and out of your characters' mouths, there's still going to be some politics involved. Now, did Forrest Gump come out and say that everyone should be Christian? No. But neither did that scene in Avengers Endgame when all the girls got together and did their girl power moment that a lot of people got angry about. Did I recognize that was, yeah, that was obviously they were doing a little bit of messaging there. Girl power. There's a little bit of political message there. So, why did that bother you? But people like me who are atheists, we watch countless movies where the afterlife is part of the story. It's just assumed to be real. I love The Lord of the Rings. Professor Tolkien, who wrote that, admitted that even though it's not a direct one for one allegorical tale, he did say that he imbued all of his heroes, from Aragorn to the hobbits, but especially, he said, Samwise Gamgee and Frodo, with what he considered the best, because he was a devout Catholic. He considered he had to imbue Samwise and the hobbits with the best, what he considered Christian qualities available that are out there, that exist. And he said that's part of it. Well, that's a political message. Whether you want to admit it or not, that's a political message. Do I care? No. Do I believe elves are real? No. But I still write stories about fantasy and science fiction. I don't care. Is your story good? Okay, there might be a moment in there where I can see it being a bit more overt than usual, but whatever, is the story is internally the story still consistent? If it breaks the story, then okay, maybe. But as long as it's just kind of there, which it is in Forrest Gump, it's just kind of there. And it's in a lot of TV shows and movies you'll watch where there's like Christian messaging, or you can tell the writer at least believes in an afterlife. The Sopranos, maybe the greatest show ever created, written by David Chase, who said he purposely put in all this imagery of like, there's these weird moments. I don't want to spoil anything if you've seen The Sopranos, but there's these weird moments where Tony sees something. He goes to a place. There's a character in the background that only the audience sees, and you're like, what is that? Well, David Chase has said that that's spirits. I mean, Polly Walnuts, the character, he goes to have his he goes to a spiritualist, like a psychic, who basically sees all the people that Polly has ever killed. Now, it doesn't see, we don't see it, the audience doesn't, but the psychic sort of sees it, and it's pretty much confirmed that in The Sopranos, heaven and hell, the afterlife, it seems to be real. I don't care. The Sopranos is good, so I'm just going to watch it. But do you see what I'm saying? What I'm trying to get across here is that you really don't need to be offended when you watch a movie and you see that it has politics showing. What that really means when you're noticing it, and I'm not trying to offend you by saying it, if you're that kind of person who hates it when you see sort of liberal messaging, but what that really just means is you're okay with messaging. You're okay with it and everything else. You just don't like it when the messaging is both obvious and it conflicts with your beliefs. Because it's obvious in Forrest Gump, but I bet you never got mad about it because probably, if you're like most people, you probably at least believe somewhat in an afterlife, or you want to believe, maybe you wonder about it, you wonder if there's an afterlife, you think it'd be nice if there is. So to you, that's not a terrible message, it's not offensive in any way. So for you, that's absolutely fine. Now, for people who say politics isn't in everything, it's not. They'll say it's just not. Well, it is. And I'll tell you why. And then I'll give you some examples. You can pick any. You can pick the Teletubbies. You can pick Sesame Street. You can pick The Lion King, Jurassic Park, Star Wars. Not only do the creators of all these things, if you see them interviewed, literally say that they take their beliefs and their personal politics. Politics doesn't mean just Democrat or Republican. Politics is a web of all of your belief systems and then how you feel that your leaders and the not just government leaders, your cultural leaders, how all your leaders should be moving society forward. That's pretty much what your politics is. It can involve your religion, or in my case, your lack thereof. I was born and raised in the South and raised in the church, but I am not a believer. So, and by the way, just saying you're apolitical, that is politics. And if you don't believe me, I'll take myself as an example. I'm an atheist. Just because I say I don't believe in God does not mean that I am removed from the discussion. Obviously, how I came to that conclusion puts me in the discussion. Atheist is just a word, that little A in atheist, that just means non. Like asymmetrical means not symmetrical. Atypical means not typical. Atheist means not theistic. If you're a believer, then you are theistic. There's basically two kinds, right? There's monotheistic, meaning you believe in one God, or you are polytheistic and you believe in many. I am atheistic, meaning none, not theistic. That's all that means. But how did I get there? How did I get to that conclusion? Well, I guarantee you it informs many of the decisions I make in life. Being a non-believer, it absolutely, it will have an effect on the ways I vote, the way I think, the way I approach other people. Just your beliefs will also affect that if you say you're apolitical. Well, how did you get there? How did you get to being non-political, where you say, I'm not a Republican, I've never voted. Well, that's politics. It is you have such lack of faith in leaders, and then you have a reason behind that, presumably, that has led you to believe that politics is a bunch of BS. It's just a bunch of BS. Well, what is the belief system that got you there? That is your politics. If you're staying out of it, then you are giving power to whoever is the loudest of the politicians, whoever is the loudest leaders in your wherever you live on earth, wherever you live in the universe, for now and for all times. As long as there are intelligent beings out there, if you are a non-participant, then simply by stepping away, you are then saying, I'm going to let the people who are currently in power keep having that power without ever questioning it because I am staying out of it. Okay, well, then your non-vote then does become a vote, whether you want to admit it or not. That's just the way it is. You had to reach a decision, or you had to reach a conclusion somehow. And how you reach that conclusion is your belief system. And that belief system, once you take your hands and start making art, either by typing out a story, drawing something or painting something, sculpting something, or making music with your voice or whatever, playing the guitar, once you start doing that, you're going to fall into this equation. That equation is this. Basically, whenever someone says, where does an artist get their ideas? I can give you this formula. And it's pretty simple. And here it is. Knowledge plus your personal interests plus your politics equals your idea. I'll give you an example. Michael Crichton is a scientist. He was a doctor. He was a surgeon. He's a researcher. He believed in research, but in his research, he came across times when he thought that science was being a little too reckless. Now, his knowledge comes into play as being a person of science himself. His interests, well, what's cooler than like dinosaurs, right? So basically that equation could be rewritten as your politics plus your knowledge of the world of just things, the things you know about planets, dinosaurs, how houses are built, your knowledge. Then combine that with basically whatever you think is cool. Well, he thought dinosaurs were pretty cool. His politics are that corporations and governments sometimes shake hands. Actually, often he believed it was pretty much too much. And you could get anything you want for money as long as you don't ask how many people you have to hurt to get it. So he combined that with the story of some dinosaurs running around, because dinosaurs are cool, and thus you get Jurassic Park. Anywhere in there does that book or movie mention Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, anything? Does it even mention the word democracy? No. But his politics, Michael Crichton's personal fingerprints, are all over that story. Some of you might be saying, well, what about something, Chad, like the Teletubbies, right? Some children's show. That can't possibly have politics in it. Again, it comes back to what are the personal beliefs of the people who made that show? Well, you see in the Teletubbies, and you see in Barney the Purple Dinosaur, you see in Sesame Street, you see characters, often the message is kindness. Don't bully others. If you see someone who's hurt, help them. Believe it or not, these things are not intrinsic necessarily to all humans. Matter of fact, it's not intrinsic to societies or individuals necessarily. Now, some people may be born with unusual kindness in them, the same way some people might be just born a psychopath. But as far as getting a message out to mass groups of people, you could do a lot worse than shows like Teletubbies or Sesame Street. It's got an incredible messaging system, puppets and funny voices. It's all disguising it. But when it tells you not to bully people, Or it shows one of the creatures, one of the puppets or somebody falls down and gets hurt and the others come over and help them. The reason you don't think that's political is because you already believe that. So for you, it's not political, it's just the truth. See what I'm saying? Kind of like the Forrest Gump analogy I gave before. If you think Forrest Gump doesn't have political messaging in it, then it means that it already aligns with your politics. And so you think that's just how reality is. Of course, everyone believes in God. Of course, everyone thought the war in Vietnam was bad. Of course, everyone thought that, or else you wouldn't have liked Forrest Gump. If you found Forrest Gump offensive, I can just about guarantee it's because you don't agree with any of the messaging in there. Maybe you feel it depicted Vietnam in an unfair way to the soldiers or something, and so you found that offensive, or something like that. So it has a message. It's just if you're not offended by it, it means that you already agreed with it, and so you don't see it as propaganda. You don't see it as having an agenda. You don't see it as having messaging or politics. You just already agree with it. The same thing with the Teletubbies, the same thing with Barney the Pink or Purple Dinosaur, the same thing with Sesame Street and every children's show ever. Whatever they, well, the ones that I know of anyway, there may be ones out there that are teaching weird stuff, but the basics that we all grew up on, where they're teaching you kindness, they're teaching you the alphabet, they're teaching you it's okay to be smart and not be nerdy, or to be nerdy is to be fun, is to be cool, and it's not cool to bully them, and all this stuff. They have messages on there about what it's like to have two parents of the same gender, or what it's like to grieve when someone dies. Well, you're starting to get into politics because people grieve differently. And Sesame Street is trying to teach you that it's okay to show your emotions. Some people's belief systems think that people should bottle that up, especially men. They'll try to tell men to bottle up your emotions. A lot of societies culturally believe that. Bottle your emotions up. Don't talk about it. Well, Sesame Street's political message, its personal belief structure, is you should talk about your emotions, and everyone's grief is different. You should talk about it. You should be brave about it, and you should feel okay crying. You shouldn't be ashamed to cry. I'll give you another one. Star Wars. I can't tell you how many people have shocked me when they say they say that Star Wars should be like it always was and not have a political message. George Lucas, I shouldn't even have to quote him, but he has said many times in interviews back then in 1977 when the first movie came out, and in an interview he did somewhat like maybe 8 years ago or something with James Cameron, the director. They interviewed each other. He has always said that when that first came out, the rebels were kind of like an allegory for the Viet Cong or whatever, and the empire was the United States. Let me say that again. In George Lucas's mind, when he created it, and he still looks at it this way, the empire was imperialistic like the United States, because he saw the United States as being very imperialistic and trying to just be this sort of monolithic thing that controls everything, and it's a government that just sort of does what it wants or whatever. So a lot of you may think, well, that doesn't make sense, because the imperial officers have very close to basically German SS officer uniforms. Yeah, Lucas and his costume designers knew that if they used Nazi imagery, they could kind of drive it home that these were the bad guys and that they were imperialistic, because there is such a thing as just like cultural knowledge, and you kind of absorb it. I'll quote the channel Red Letter Media here. They'll say things about moments like this in film. They'll say, "I bet you didn't notice it, but your brain did." I bet you didn't notice it, but your brain did. What that means is you can be watching a movie, reading a book, watching a TV show, whatever. And even though you think you're just kind of getting this surface information, there is subliminal information that is feeding your brain that the artist knows to include, that will kind of use cultural touchstones or whatever to, or camera tricks or whatever to make you more engaged. And one thing that George Lucas and his costume designers did in Star Wars was make the Imperials look very much like the Germans did in World War II. Why? Because even though you probably weren't sitting in the theater or at home when you first saw Star Wars going, hey, that looks like the Axis powers in World War II. That looks like Hitler's people. Um, you didn't necessarily think that consciously, probably the first time you saw it, but somewhere in the back of your brain, you know that bad guys dress like that. And you've picked it up from documentaries about World War II, how the Germans dressed back then, you know it. You just kind of you pick up on it, especially if you're like over the age of like 15. You're going to pick up on that, and it's going to make it, even though you're not conscious of it during that time, your brain is picking up on things that your conscious mind is sort of, it's like it sneaks past your consciousness. Tolkien did this without even mentioning God or Jesus in anywhere in The Lord of the Rings. But he brings up spiritualism and faith and an afterlife all throughout it. In his world, even though he in real life is a devout Catholic, he was a devout Catholic. In his world, it seemed the Christian God didn't exist. There's other the Valar and things that are almost like angelic type creatures, but they're not literally from the Christian Bible. So he snuck that in there, but there is imagery. There are moments that seem like tales of like King Arthur. There are moments where you see Gandalf appear and he's said to be in a white light or something, and it makes him seem angelic, when he returns from the dead. Spoilers. These are ways that your brain is kind of being hacked by the author. The writer is getting you there. He or she is getting you to understand what they're trying to communicate, but they're being a little bit more subtle about it. Some artists just aren't that subtle. They just shove their agenda in there, and they all have an agenda. As a writer, everyone has. I'm a writer, and I can't stop it. It's why would I be writing this book in the first place if it's just about monsters shooting laser beams at each other? And you might say, well, Chad, you just tell a good story. Yeah, but in the story, all those characters have different points of view. All those characters, some of them believe in imperialism, some of them believe in being misanthropes, meaning that they believe they hate everyone. A misanthrope is someone who doesn't care about society at all and wants to be left alone and literally checks out and you know, becomes a shut in or goes in a cave somewhere like a hermit. These guys have these personal perspectives based on their politics. And if I'm going to have an ending to the movie or the book or the show, I have to come to some conclusion on my own. I have to. Even if the people I label the bad guys win the movie, they're winning at the end of the movie. They're winning. They're beating the good guys because I the writer would then be delivering a message of warning. Just look at Planet of the Apes or movies like that where the bad guys end up winning. That is the writer trying to surprise you and also warn you what could happen. Like you'd ever watch a movie like where at the end, the monster, like Freddy Krueger, or you're watching a ghost movie and at the end, the ghosts end up coming back. You thought they were dead, but they come back at the last minute before the credits roll and kill the hero. Well, that's a nihilistic point of view. The writer is probably feeling pretty nihilistic when he or she wrote that and thinking, you know what? There's no escaping death. You can't just cheat death. But the kind of writer who writes a happy ending where you beat the monster and the monster's dead, and you move on with your life in a good way and your life just goes on. Well, that writer probably believes in the idea that you should never stop fighting and that you can defeat evil. You can beat evil. And that's the message they're trying to get across. And it's all coming from their politics. It's all coming from their background. Your politics is kind of based on largely where you grew up and like your parents or your guardians, whoever raised you. And then your friends and your environment follows. And then you make up your mind as you go. Hopefully you make up your own mind and you don't think you're making up your own mind, but you're really just listening to, people on podcasts or people in the news telling you what you should think. Hopefully you're not doing that. And if you are, those are your politics. Your politics, you ever notice, you might be afraid sometimes, or maybe should be afraid when you ever notice that you're changing your ideas as frequently as like all of those podcasters that you follow, if they all think the same, and you see that all seven of them change their mind at the same time, and then you change your mind at the same time, and that happens several times throughout your life, that means that you're kind of following their crowd. And whatever movies they like are probably going to be the movies you like. And if they call something woke or anti woke, you're going to believe it because you were told to. So the last thing I'll say is I actually invite you to watch movies and TV shows and books, read books and graphic novels, even if you don't necessarily always agree with it. Just forget about the stuff. For instance, I have and own The Passion of the Christ. Yeah, I told you, I'm an atheist, but I own the Mel Gibson movie, The Passion of the Christ. Why? I think it's a good movie. Now, I see it as more like the way I watch Lord of the Rings. I don't believe any of that really happened, but I watch it because it's good. Um, so if I can do that, I would invite you to watch movies and TV shows or play video games that you think have a message you don't like. If it's enjoyable and you know you can just get through it, then just get through it. Like it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like their politics, a writer's politics is just what inspired them to write the story. And if it's too heavy-handed for you, okay. But just remember, it's heavy-handed in many places that you just didn't notice. Like if you think Star Wars is not political, then that just means because it's pretty heavy-handed. It's anti-imperialistic. And so if you don't see that, then there's only two excuses for that. You either A, already agree that imperialism is bad, or B, you don't know what imperialism is, and you maybe don't know that he was trying to draw an analogy between the empire and the United States, and maybe you don't like if you're an American, you may not like that your favorite movie, Star Wars, is kind of a critique and a breakdown a little bit of the United States. If you don't believe me, the third prequel that Lucas made, Revenge of the Sith, he literally has a moment in there where Anakin Skywalker says to Obi-Wan, "If you're not with me, then you're my enemy." Lucas said he specifically put that in there because I think it was a year before, maybe a year and a half year before, that George W. Bush during the Iraq War, when he was talking about, he said, "If you're not with us, you're against us." He said that in a speech. I don't remember if it was State of the Union or if it was a speech he gave just kind of off the cuff to some reporters. I saw it some years ago. I saw it when it was live because I'm that old. I was around when all that happened. 9/11 and all that. I was there. I wasn't in New York, but I mean, I was in the United States. I was watching it. I was alive. I was 20, 21 then. And I remember when George W. Bush said that. It was in the news. People saying, "Wow, it's kind of aggressive." Him saying, "You're either with us, or you're either with us, or you're kind of against us," and is the way he put it. Well, Anakin Skywalker, who turned to the Empire, he turned to the bad side in Revenge of the Sith. He said to Obi-Wan Kenobi, he said, "You're either with me or you're my enemy." And George Lucas said he put that in there because of what President Bush said. You still don't think the empire is supposed to be the United States? I mean, that doesn't mean George Lucas hates America. It means his politics is that he fears that it sometimes flirts with fascism, and he's worried it could go that way. So you see, you can still enjoy Star Wars and see its message, and not hate America. I mean, if you do, that's your politics. I don't, but maybe you hate it. That's your politics. But if you're the kind of person who loves America, then you can still go, okay, I see what George Lucas was saying. I see why he was afraid of what the Patriot Act that George W. Bush and the politicians at the time were pushing post 9/11. I see why George Lucas was worried. You can still see that. And if you still don't agree with it and say, I don't, I think George Lucas was being too harsh on George W. Bush. Well, that's fine too. Just ignore that when you watch Revenge of the Sith. just ignore it. Just why can't you ignore it? So when you see a scene that like everyone complains about in Avengers Endgame, when all the girls do their girl power scene, did I think that was heavy-handed? Yeah, but whatever. Girl power for them. I don't care. What is it? How does it affect me? That's in every movie ever. I've already demonstrated how it's in all your children's shows. It's in all your movies. It's overt, whether you want to believe it or not. It's just sometimes like in Forrest Gump, or maybe you love Jurassic Park and you love RoboCop. I mean, RoboCop has an anti-corporation message, even though the movie never really comes out and says we hate corporations. It's obviously a send-up of a world where the American government has kind of given all power to corporations, and they can just make a robot man out of a dead human without asking his or his family's permission. And then there's propaganda, right? There's the news, the funny, well, kind of darkly funny newscasters saying, RoboCop, who is he? What is he? Where does he come from? And they're smiling as they say it like he's a big hero. It's awesome that we brought this guy back from the dead that didn't ask to be, and he had his memories wiped and they're coming back to him and he's like living in a nightmare. Like, it's obviously a weird, dark comedy action story, sci-fi tale that has Paul Verhoeven's politics smeared all over the screen. Like, it's all in the script, it's all over the screen, it's there. It's everywhere. But it's just the RoboCop is so cool and funny at times. You're too busy laughing at the absurdity. I mean, the violence is even funny. Like, it's over the top to the point that it's like beyond satire. It becomes like almost just straight like Saturday Night Live comedy or something, like a sketch show at times. But you didn't know that, maybe. Probably never knew it when you were a kid. And now that you're older, you may think that it has some of that in there, but it's not really political. No, RoboCop is political. It all is. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Teletubbies, Top Gun. You may not even agree with it. I've seen a lot of people who say that Tom Cruise and Top Gun have maybe made been like almost like a propaganda for the Navy. Well, whatever you believe, that's Tom Cruise's politics. Whether you think it was propaganda or not, that's what he believed. He thought it was pretty cool to be a Navy pilot. Remember what I talked about, where your ideas come from? It's your knowledge, it's your politics, and it's what you think is cool. When you combine those three things, you get an idea. Like, if you think the idea of asteroids hitting the planet, what that could be, that's a cool idea. Asteroids hitting the planet. Well, that's your idea. That's sort of a notion of what you think is cool. But you don't have an idea yet until you add your personal knowledge of the world, how politics works, what might happen if an asteroid hits, what the blast radius would be depending on its size and velocity, and then combine your personal beliefs. That will give you an idea. That's what people often say. Ideas, you can't track where they come from, but you really can. I mean, like I said, it's your personal beliefs plus your knowledge plus whatever you think is cool. You throw them together in a pot like a stew and you stir it up, and there out comes an idea. So people who wrote like Armageddon and Deep Impact, these movies about asteroid impacts, they come off like action films because the writers thought that would be cool. Going into outer space to blow up an asteroid is cool looking. It'll look cool on screen. That is their personal interest. That's what they think is cool. They did some research, kind of. Armageddon, I think, is considered the number one, it's like the least scientifically accurate movie of all time. I think it's still number one, or at least it's up there. So they got some stuff together, what they thought was knowledge, but turned out to be really bad science and really bad knowledge, and combined it with what they thought looked cool and their personal politics. Their personal politics about sacrifice, about who should do the right thing and how to do the right thing and how nations might come together and kind of fight each other on what way they should be doing. But then you send these rough, tough, working class guys into outer space, even though that makes no sense. As Ben Affleck once said, he told Michael Bay when they were filming the movie, why are you teaching oil rig guys to be astronauts? Shouldn't you teach astronauts how to be oil rig guys? And Michael Bay basically told him to shut up, like shut the F up or whatever. But because you know why? Because Michael Bay thought that would be cool. It would be more fun to send guys into outer space who don't know how to fly a space shuttle if we could do this weird story where we quickly teach them how to fly. He thought that would be cool. He combined it with his belief system about what sacrifice means and whatever. Now, is it the deepest political message ever? No. Is Teletubbies and Barney the Purple Dinosaur, is it the deepest political message? No. But the creators, their beliefs do pour into it. So that's all I have to say. Basically, it's a way of my kind of getting it out there that you don't have to be offended. Like, it's almost like I'm trying to give people permission. You don't have to be offended. Something can be not your belief system, and that's perfectly fine. And you need to recognize that your belief system is actually probably overrepresented everywhere. You just never noticed it because you already agree with it. So you don't call it propaganda. You don't call it messaging. You don't call it political because you already agree with it. Or you just missed it. It went right over your head and you just completely misinterpreted it. I've seen people misinterpret before and not understand the political message of American History X of all movies. It's a great movie. It's a dark movie, but it's great. And I've seen some people, let's just say, who are not the best people in the world. I've met them who think that American History X is a pro-white supremacy movie. They love the movie because they think it is. They think it's pro that instead of anti-hate. That's a thing, guys. That people can then see the politics but misinterpret it because their brain just missed it somehow, and they interpret it as being on their side, quote unquote, and so therefore they don't think the movie is bad at all. They don't think it has a negative political message, or it's just, it is what it is. They think it's a good thing because they saw the politics but from the wrong perspective. Anyways, next time you see something you don't agree with, you don't have to boycott it. You don't have to be offended. You don't even have to engage with it. It's not a big deal. Just move on. It really doesn't matter. Everything's political. And if you don't like what you're hearing, you don't even have to go online and go in the comment section and attack it. It just doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter that much. So if someone's trying to tell you to be offended and boycott something because it's got too much politics in it, just like a video game that's coming out, just wait for the reviews and see if it's good. If it's a movie, wait for the reviews, see if it's good. And you can just wait for the reviews. See if the game is badly made and it sucks, if the movie has got terrible writing and terrible acting, then you can skip it. But you don't have to live in anger that it exists. I guess that's probably the best way I can put it. Don't live in anger that a piece of art you don't like exists. All right, guys, that's all I've got. Hope you guys have a great time. Hope you found something enjoyable out of this rant, or whatever you want to call it, this lecture, essay, whatever. Have a good one, and we'll see you next time. Bye.